Seamless. How's everyone going? Welcome to another live Grape and Grape brewing demonstration. Today we have something quite exciting, don't we, Ben?
We do. We do something completely different, as they used to say.
Yeah.
On the Monty Python.
So on that note, yeah, well, we're brewing on a brand new, well, Ben is brewing, I'll be watching and doing stuff behind the camera. One of the brand new Braumeisters that we've got in stock. We did an unboxing video, which is yet to be uploaded, so this will be the first, I suppose, unveiling on camera. Yeah, we hope that you guys enjoy watching the thing in action. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Joel and this is Ben. It's probably right that we introduce ourselves. We work at a homebrew shop. That homebrew shop is Grape and Grape. We're committed to helping you brew better beer. We do that by making videos and doing live streams, just like this one. So if that sounds like it might be your jam, maybe consider subscribing or liking and doing all that stuff. It'll really help us out. But mostly we just like to share our knowledge and help you learn to brew better beer at home. I don't think there's much more for me to say.
Probably,
really.
I don't know.
I think I'll just get out the way.
I think you did great.
Thanks. I'll get out the way, yeah. And I think from here, I'll let you show off the goods.
Which I'm genuinely excited to do. This is such a cool unit.
Cool. All right. I'm gonna do the thing. See ya.
I might pop around the other
side.
Yeah,
you do that.
Get out from behind the HLT. Because this is normally our, so we make fresh work kits, which we sell to homebrewers, novice homebrewers, and sometimes not so novice homebrewers. I've been known to take 1 or 2 home as well. And to make those, we've got a brewery on site, so we're doing the demo in our normal kind of work kit brewing space. So I'm I was tucked away a little bit behind our big HLT in the corner, but now I'm free. So we can do what we need to do. So without any further ado, the new Braumeister. Very exciting. It is one of those things where the old Braumeister was kind of like, I don't really know how they're gonna make too many improvements on that. Like, it's already pretty solid, like, I can't think of anything I'd like it to do better. And yet somehow they've managed to almost across the board improve everything about it. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. But to kick us off and to get us started and to get us actually brewing, one of the things which they have done is the controller comes with built-in Wi-Fi. And not just like built-in Wi-Fi, like your phone, if you take it to a place where you're connected to the Wi-Fi before, it will automatically connect. It'll jump on the net and connect to what is called My Spiegel, which is like the sort of Braumeister uses sort of, how would you describe it? Sort of like a...
that is a good question. How would you describe it in one word? It's like
I can think of a lot of adjectives, but...
Yeah. It's an online database / recipe building suite.
Yeah, you can kind of, like, everybody who sort of is a part of the broader Braumeister community can sort of throw recipes on the website. They can share recipes. You can save recipes in your kind of little profile.
Yeah, it's like an online community. Yeah.
And it also sort of tracks things like, as we'll get into a little bit later, you can actually ferment in the Braumeister now as well. And it will do things like track your ferments, log data points. If you use it with like a tilt hydrometer, because it's got Bluetooth capabilities as well, it can become your Wi-Fi compatible Bluetooth device, which will log your fermentation data and all those sorts of things. So it's very cool, very intuitive, and very sort of all-inclusive now. But I'm getting sidetracked. So one of the things that that is really cool is that you can auto-sync your controller now to your My Spiegel profile, which we set up at Grape, one of those. And this morning, I came in here, jumped onto Beersmith and knocked out a quick alt beer recipe, which I'm wont to do. And just exported it as an XML file. So XML is kind of like the universal brewing software file format that all of them tend to be able to read and understand. So I jumped onto Beersmith, knocked out a recipe, exported the file, and then all I had to do was log into My Spiegel, drag the file onto the profile, and it automatically updates the My Spiegel with that recipe. And because this has Wi-Fi and is automatically synced to my Spiegel website, if Joel zooms into the controller, we're about to test this.
Okay, all right, here we go. Wish me luck.
So I've had the unit humming along at like 60 degrees on manual mode this morning, just so that we're like kind of basically where we need to be. So if I go into, actually I'll check it first. We're zoomed in?
Yeah, we're zoomed in.
I'll check it first with my recipes to see if the recipe's actually there.
I'm not sure how clear it'll be for you guys at home watching right now on the stream, but we will be uploading this in high def later. So just
that's
follow.
It.
Yeah, you can sort of just imagine that Ben's pointing.
So I did a test run of this unit last week, and just like grabbed the first recipe that I could find, which was a rye IPA, and that went on there. And this morning I dragged that alt beer recipe on here, and it's sitting right there in my little list of recipes, good to brew. So let's click brew start. Let's select the alt beer. Water's filled in, and we're going.
So all you did was literally just upload it via the clouds and port it across, and then
on the same computer that I was, well, theoretically on the same computer you've got Beersmith loaded onto. Log into your My Spiegel, and you can just drag your XML files from Beersmith straight into your account. Oh, camera's just checking out the roof.
Yeah, just don't mind me.
yeah, literally just drag it into your mash Spiegel and then your Braumeister is ready to go for your brew. So that's, for me, doing these demos, a super, super handy feature because one thing that I had to do with the earlier Braumeister models is I would make the recipe on Beersmith and then I would print that off, take that to the unit and manually input all the sort of different things that I wanted to do for the beer. Whereas now I can do all of that into one place and then just upload it and the unit will automatically have it. So very, very cool.
Yeah.
So we are brewing an alt beer today. I thought we'd go with a German style and one that we haven't done before. I think, whereabouts are Spiegel? They're Bamberg, are they? That general area?
Beat me, yeah.
That part of Germany. So they're more kind of down near Bavaria. I don't know exactly where they are actually, which is probably bad. I should learn that. Lovely people though. Love the people at Spiegel. So I probably would have been more apt to do like a Rauch beer or a Hefeweizen or something like that.
Okay, yeah, right.
I thought let's go with something that we haven't, like it's completely different to anything we've done before, but it's still German. So I think the alt beer is a nice option for that. And I've broken my rule with German beer. Tell us. I was telling Joel this morning, so generally with my German beers, I'll stick to 1, maybe 2 grains in a malt bill. Sort of be real kind of traditionalist, purist about it. But in a beer that doesn't need it, I've gone with a 5 grain recipe. But I will explain that as we get closer to it. But while we're waiting for this to heat up, so this is going to heat up to 63, and then we'll pop our grains in. But we can, I guess, talk about some of the more like physical features rather than the soft features of the new Brews. So they'll come double jacketed, which serves a couple of purposes.
I'll just recompose
yeah.
more of the...
Yep, so double jacketed, which will help to sort of insulate it through your mash, but it will also mean that you can cool it at the end of your boil. And you can use it, like I mentioned earlier, you can use these for fermentation now. So you can actually use the cooling jacket as a cooling jacket for your fermenter as well. And you can use like there's the Braumeisters you can buy, which there's a port in the back of the controller for it. And that will, based on your fermentation, control your heating and cooling and do all those things, which is very awesome. The center tie rod, which I don't like, a lot of you guys might not have seen it, but it has a bunch of markings on it, which those are actually labeled now. So you've got like your 15, 20, 25 litre marks labeled as such. And while this is heating up as well, I'll show you the malt pipe. I'm not used to these like product demo streams. I might get through all the features in the first 5 minutes potentially. I'll try not to. So it's got an extra set of lugs now, which is really cool if you're doing the Lodo thing. So you can have it on the lower set of lugs and still have the malt pipe submerged under the liquid while you're sparging, which just helps to eliminate unnecessary oxygen intake.
Yeah, right.
Through your mash.
So you're not getting any splashing, I guess, up when you're initially getting that drain, that first sort of amount of water come through. It's not splashing around.
And it's not just dripping through the air into your so
water, wort, I should say.
It's such a simple little thing to put on there.
Yeah, yeah.
But like so effective. And I'm trying to think what other physical features there are. It's got, I mean, the old one, the old Plus had the drainage.
So you got that extra drain valve on the back,
on the bottom. So that's there again. a lot of the features are with the controller.
Yes, right, yeah. So a lot of work, they put a lot of work into upgrading or updating the tech in the controller, the software and the controller itself, which I'm sure you'll get to.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll definitely, once we're in the mash, I'll play around, because one of the things you can do, which you could sort of do with the last ones, definitely couldn't with the older ones, is make adjustments to temperatures and timings and things on the fly throughout your program.
Yes,
really easily. So I'll definitely be able to illustrate. Yay, we reached the temperature. I will definitely be able to illustrate the ease with which some of those things go. But it's asking me to pour in my malt.
Right.
So
get a shot of that. Again, forgive me while I do a crash zoom.
Yeah, sure.
In.
So it's actually telling me what malts I'm pouring in as well, which is pretty cool.
Again, hard to make out probably in the live stream, but check back for the higher quality upload when we do it. But yeah, it's a nice big, I don't know, prompt there to fill in your malt, pour in the malt.
So I'm going to let I had a plan, and then I just realised I don't know how I'm going to make it work. But I was going to pretend that the Braumeister made the malt materialise, but then I realised it's not really going to work. It's not really going to look good. So we'll just grab the malt. I'll grab some scissors from over here though. And we'll snip open the bag. Normally I rip it with my fingers, so I'm kind of breaking with a lot of traditions today. Make a nice clean tear.
So for anyone watching at home, of course, today is a bit, as Ben said, of a different video. We're doing a product demonstration of the new Braumeister. So if anyone has any questions regarding the machine, are there any owners out there?
We've had a couple of people buy the new ones since we got them in, which is cool.
Maybe using one of the older models and considering an upgrade, or maybe you're just curious. Feel free to pop some questions in the chat and we will answer them.
If you have been considering an upgrade, like this is a good one to upgrade to, because there are so many new features and so much like more awesome stuff that hasn't been in the previous versions. And I'm sure you'll be able to sell your previous model to help go a bit of the ways towards it.
Offset the cost.
I don't know too many brewers who've brewed on a Braumeister who wouldn't like to have one.
Yeah. It's a bit hard to see without the luxury of a second camera, but Ben is pouring the grains into the malt pipe, which is the smaller pipe inside the Braumeister. We do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So Tim's asking, does it come in 65 or 70 litres?
20 and 50 at this stage. I don't think it goes bigger. I think it jumps from 50 up to 200. Which I don't think they've finalised the commercial size controllers yet, because it's not just a simple matter of changing
It's just swapping the unit over. They've got to change the plugs and
the way it functions and all the different things, and so it's a little bit more involved than just upscaling. But they are working on that.
So generally speaking, they come in 10 litres? Is that the smallest?
10, 20 and 50, 20? I'm not 100%. Yeah, they'd have to have the 10s, right? Like the 10s are, they'd have the 10s.
And then from the 50 it jumps up to?
The 200,
200, then 500, then 1,000.
Then thousands, yeah. The thousands are very cool as well. We just sold 1,000 recently to Copperhead Brewery up in Cooroy on the Sunshine Coast, which I was lucky enough. So my mum is up on the Sunshine Coast, in not too far away from Cooroy, sort of Noosaville area, and went up to visit and got to pay a visit to Copperhead and to their other. They've got two places up there. They've got the Copperhead Brewery, which is sort of more pubby, and then on like the main sort of Hastings Street in Noosa proper, they've got like a more Asian themed sort of restaurant / bar thingy as well, and both were phenomenal. The food was insanely good. And the beers were really, really nice. And they were doing, so he was basically supplying 2 pubs with a full range of tailored beers as well, because they had specific beers, like I think they had a miso lager or something at the Asian place, which was delicious and like worked really well with the food. So like they weren't just doing, you know, a pale, a pils and a IPA or whatever. Like they had like a full range of tailored beers at 2 different venues on a 200-litre Braumeister. So
yeah, right. So they were busy.
He must have been a very busy, very, very busy brewer. So now they've upgraded to the 1,000, and that's going to make their life a lot easier. Like knock out sort of, what would that be, 20 kegs at once instead of
sure
10?
Yep.
No, 5.
Yeah,
how many kegs would
a
200 be?
Factor in
4
dead
kegs at
space
once on a
losses,
200.
Yeah. You can, and Tim, on the older models that I am more familiar with, but I see no reason why it wouldn't work on the newer models. You can squeeze a bit, so it's 50 litres is the stated volume of the larger Braumeister, but you can squeeze a bit more out of it. You can even push it up to 70 if you're really, with a few tricks, depending on the gravity of the beer, you can squeeze a bit more out.
So we do, so our fresh work kits that we make here, we make them on, basically we've got 2 500 litres, and we'll do like we'll often do split batches. So we'll do the Nipah and the Milkshake IPA on the one brew day and split them into the 2 kettles, put the lactose into one of them and slightly change the hopping regime as needed. But we knock out a lot of wort with that. And for a long time we were knocking out sort of 800-900 litres in the 500 litre, just in one 500 litre, through sparging and double mashing. And that worked quite well as well. So you can definitely achieve it. If you've seen any of my Braumeister demos before, you know I like to push the limits of things. And I'll regularly squeeze 7 or 8 kilos of grain into a malt pipe that's supposed to max out at 6. And with a bit of encouragement, they can definitely manage it. These ones in particular, the new models. So another one of the physical features I forgot to mention is the new pumps. They actually have I'm pretty happy with that mash in actually. I'm just gonna pop the I kept it moving the whole way through and got no dough balls. So that is a good lesson. If you keep breaking up the surface as you're pouring the grain in, keep everything moving, keep everything loose, then your likelihood of getting dough balls decreases. But it's still worth checking. So they've got a control on the pump now, which basically means that you can turn the intensity of the pump up or down. There's a little knob. So if you have a quite full malt pipe, like I like to do sometimes, sometimes the pump can sort of struggle a little bit to push the wort through. You can crank up the pump and get it through a little bit more. Or alternatively, which I kind of do a bit today, I've got just around 4.5 kilos of grain in here, which is a little bit less than the Braumeister prefers, I can actually, malt is poured in. Continue, malt filled in. Cool, and we're mashing. Sometimes it can get a little bit boisterous with the wort kind of choosing to fountain or to do things like that. So you can actually turn the pump down as well. If you've got a lower malt load in your malt pipe. So yeah, options, lots of options. We're off and racing. A nice little flow there. So I'm going to stick the lid on. We've got a couple of degrees that we lost, partly from the adding of the malt and partly from me standing around talking for a long period of time without kicking on the heat. So we've got a couple of degrees to get back up to our first mashing temperature, which is a 63 degree rest, so you kind of beta amylase rest. And then we'll jump up to a 71. And then we'll jump up to a mash out at 78, and that's going to kind of finish everything off. But while we're here, let's jump into the controller and kind of have a bit of a play with a few different things.
All right, let me just commenting in the chat, so I'll come down.
So this is the actual controller itself, and we probably could have looked at it a little bit more before we started the recipe, but we are putting out a unboxing video which is going to go into a lot of detail.
We do, yeah.
Go through like basically the whole controller and all the different settings and features. But while we're actually brewing, we've got the overview button we can hit, and this will give us a rundown of the recipe itself. Where we're at in terms of the recipe, and it's like a little checklist, like it'll tick off the different stages as you hit them. So right now we're up to the first rest. We haven't finished it yet, so it hasn't given us a tick. But the adding in the malt and the hitting mashing temperature both have ticks next to them. So we get an idea of what we've already accomplished and what is to come in the mash. So we can go back from there. We also have on the edge an edit button. So if you push that, it lets us play with the temperature. So if I, where is it? Okay, cool, yep. So I can push it up or down as needed. And then hit change. And within that screen, you can also change the timing and things as well. So I remember the very first, or it might not have even been the very first, but when I first started working here about sort of 8 years ago, the controllers that they had at the time, once you were in your mashing program, you were in your mashing program. If you wanted to change things, you had to get out of that mashing program, edit it, and then get back into it. And if you were sort of already a fair way into the mash, that became a real sort of challenging endeavor, because you had to figure out how many minutes into the mash you were and then change your mash time to account for that. And it was a bit of a struggle, but I think the most recent controller made that a lot easier, and this has just made it easier again. You can jump in without interrupting anything and just edit things on the fly. So it's super handy. I don't think there's any other specific features of the Brau.
Of the hardware yeah, I mean they did make some pretty good upgrades in the last generation hardware wise that they've carried through.
There is so the temp probe.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So in the previous iterations, the temperature probe was like a little bump at the bottom of your Braumeister that sort of popped up from the base. and that was what was reading your temperature settings. They've actually changed it now so that the center tie rod, which is what you kind of thread your malt pipe and your filters onto and kind of screw down your crossbar to hold your filters in place. They've got the sensor inside the tie rod now, and it goes up a decent way into it. So it's measuring the temperature from a more kind of, from right in the middle of your mash basically, and from a decent sample size of your mash as well. So you're not getting like this little bit at the bottom of your, right next to the element.
Exactly, yep, I was going to say.
Which can, that was still super accurate.
Yeah.
This is just going to make it a lot more accurate. You're really measuring the mash itself, independent of the elements, which are far enough away from that center tie rod that it's not going to interfere with readings and things like that, which is very cool.
So Mick asked a question about prices. I did. I wrote a comment in the chat, but it looks like YouTube didn't allow it, maybe because I was putting. I think it's an advertising thing, perhaps.
Okay.
Something about.
So they are a little bit more than the previous ones. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
I do have it.
Oh, you got it.
So yeah, they are.
That's why we have producers, folks.
They are a premium product, of course, and with the new innovations.
Still not the most expensive thing on the market, though.
Yeah,
by a long shot.
So the 10 litre, which is the smallest one, that starts at 2,890 Australian. We're talking for anyone who's watching overseas. And then we've got the 20 litre, which is probably the most popular model. And that is 3,450.
It's about 500 more than the previous Plus was.
Okay, got it.
So the last generation Braumeister Plus was about 2,900.
And we still have some of those kicking around, I think.
I don't know, actually.
I felt like I saw them on the website, but yeah, who knows? We're going to slowly run out
I think
of
we
those,
had
obviously.
a handful, but I wasn't sure if they were the pluses or the regular ones.
And then the 50, the new 50 is 4,650.
Which again is not much more than the previous. It's a little bit of an increase, but for all the extra features and all the extra functionality that they've built into it, it's a pretty reasonable price change, I think. Like, I still can't get over the fact that I literally wrote a recipe, dragged it in, and it just knows what to do now.
Yeah.
That, to me, is... It's got the same timer function that the last one had as well, with the added benefit that you can do it from your phone. So if you're planning to brew the next morning, you can fill it with water, set your timer, and you can actually... be at temp, ready to go when you come down in the morning. Yeah. That's always my biggest thing at home. Like, I don't have a Braumeister at home. I do get to brew with one at least once a month though here, which is one of the perks of working in a place like this. But it's not the brewing itself that's hard to kind of get psyched for. It's the getting everything set up, getting the pot full of water and all those, like that kind of early prep stuff. And because it takes so long to come to temp and all the rest of it, and you're juggling a few different things, and because I have 3 kids and a whole bunch of other responsibilities, it tends to happen that I don't actually get the grain in the water until mid-afternoon.
Yeah.
Whereas if I had my water sitting at temp, ready to go when I got out of bed in the morning, I could go in, dump the grains in, and then go and have breakfast or whatever else, and it'd just be so much easier. This is a very handy feature, and like a very German feature, I think. Just the very industrious Germans.
Very efficient, very...
Yeah, it's just like, don't waste, that's time that you've wasted that you could have been spent like achieving more. Getting more stuff done. Yeah. So I guess we should pivot to the alt beer maybe.
Yeah. You want to talk about that?
This is new ground for us. We haven't done a product stream before.
No.
Like a new product
It's
kind
a
of
bit out of our
demo stream
wheelhouse.
before. I've kind of done so many brewing demos now. I've almost, it's not scripted, but it's on runners.
Yeah.
Like it's an on rails kind of thing. So this is a little different. So alt beer. What can I say about alt beer? It's mainly found in Dusseldorf, which is north of Cologne, which is where the other German, like the really sort of popular German ale is.
Yeah, right.
Is kind of based.
Kolsch, is that from Cologne?
Kolsch, yep. So it's in the Rhineland, a fairly cool part of Germany. It stays fairly cool for pretty much all year round. It doesn't like kind of get insanely cold, but it never kind of hits warmer temperatures either. It sort of stays pretty chilled out for the whole year. And alt is German for old. So the alt beer name kind of stems from them. Funnily enough, we've talked before about Bavaria being quite conservative with their brewing and things like that. The Rhineland possibly more so, because they weren't going to buy into this fancy new trend of lager brewing. They were staying true to their kind of their classic ale techniques and ale yeasts and those sorts of things. And Cologne to a degree as well. So both of those places, which are quite close to each other. I think there's like maybe 50 k's between them, 40, 50 k's between them.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound like much from an Australian perspective. I don't know what that is in German kind of speak. Like Germany's a bit smaller of a country, I suppose, but
A bit more
40, 50 k's isn't a huge. And I'm if you're from Germany and you're like, what are you talking about? That's like. There's nowhere near the right distance between the two towns. Let me know. Correct me, please. But yeah, they've sort of both hung on to their ales, I guess, and their kind of their classic brewing tradition. But the name alt actually didn't pop up until they sort of quote unquote sold out in the 1800s and started brewing lagers.
So I was going to ask, this is back in the 1800s. This was all happening.
Yeah,
Lagers coming in.
So they eventually caved and started brewing lagers because everyone wanted them, but they used the alt beer name as like a distinction to kind of say, this is the old style versus the new fancy lagers.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
But my understanding is if you're in Dusseldorf and ask for a beer, you're going to get an alt beer. Similar to like in Cologne, if you ask for a beer, you'll get a Kolsch. Mm-hmm. I've never been to either of those places. If you have and that's not the case, let me know as well. Because I was quite upset and shocked when I was talking to a Scottish friend and mentioned... so I had this understanding of the 40, 50 and 60 shillings beers. That were in the BJCP style guidelines and everything, and I just sort of thought, you go to a bar in Scotland and you ask for a 40 shilling or a 50 shilling or a 60 shilling, they'll give you like a different strength thing, because that was the mythology around those beers, and then they had no idea what I was talking about. They were just like, no, you just generally just get like a Carlsberg or a Beck's or something like that, or a Shan. What do they drink? Drink a lot of cider. I think they drink a lot of like spirits.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just like, oh. So I had this idea in my head of like this going to Scotland and kind of, getting this nice like 40 shilling beer. So it's quite possible it's the same in Germany. Like you go to Dusseldorf and they just pour you a Beck's.
Yeah.
But as long as I don't go there, I can keep the mythology alive. But I do want to go there.
It's real if you believe it.
But they do also use Cologne and Dusseldorf use the same glassware, which is the Stenger, the kind of tall, thin, perfectly round glasses to serve the Kolsch and the alt beer.
Yeah.
Or Stanger.
I'm not familiar with it, no.
It's like a really straight-sided, like cylindrical glass, which is like quite tall and thin.
Okay. I can picture it.
But I guess like the big difference between the alt and the Kolsch is that the alt is a bit darker and a bit maltier. So the Kolsch is similar to like a Pils or a Helles in colour, like it's quite a pale beer. But it benefits from sort of the fruitiness of the ale yeast. Whereas the alt beer is more of like a copper colour, more akin to like, I guess, a Manson in terms of, which I think is a pretty fair comparison because I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of grain bill and stuff as well, and flavour profile. Very sort of melanoidin heavy, very kind of toasted malt heavy.
Malty.
And also quite hoppy and bitter.
Okay.
The alt beers, which is cool.
So yeah, kind of quite similar to an Oktoberfest then, or a Fest beer.
Yeah, maybe I'd say possibly a bit closer to Vienna.
Yeah.
It's like a Vienna lager in terms of like a modern Vienna lager.
Yep. Yes.
In terms of having that balance towards the hops and the bitterness a little bit more, but still definitely like a malt heavy beer. I think the BJCP sort of talks about having like a light sulfur character is quite allowable.
Okay, acceptable.
And common. And it should finish fairly dry as well. Like you want it to be malty, but you don't want it to be sort of overtaking your mouth and overpowering it.
And that's a good distinction to make. That sometimes people do mix up. Is that sometimes they'll equate maltiness with sweetness, not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, and I think German beers are great at doing that, at having these really flavourful malt-driven beers that finish the second you swallow them. Yep. So it just makes you keep wanting to come back for more and more and more and drink them, which is why they drink them, like particularly in Bavaria, like by the litre, because they're the type of beers you can drink by the litre.
Yep.
But there's still an explosion of flavour when they're actually in your mouth. So I think it's a really awesome thing to chase in your brewing is the ability to achieve that.
Exactly.
And normally to do that, you would do that with lagers.
Yeah.
Whereas this beer is a little bit different in that it uses an ale yeast. The ale yeast that you use with it is fairly important though, because I mentioned before it's quite a cool climate area, so like it's pretty much cold all year round. So you need an ale yeast which is going to be able to ferment well at those cooler temperatures. If you were to use just like say US-05 1056, like one of those kind of neutral American style ale yeasts, you're not going to get the right character. You really need to have the realistically the 1007, the yeast 1007 German ale yeast. Or maybe a Kolsch yeast. The Kolsch yeast, though, you get away with it, but it's a little different. Like it's quite powdery and stays in suspension, and it gives like a fruitiness that you don't really want from a alt beer.
Interesting.
But you can kind of use those two yeasts for each other's styles. Like you can use like the German ale yeast to make a Kolsch if you want to. You can use the Kolsch yeast to make an alt if you want to, but it's not going to really be 100% what you're chasing.
Right. So in a pinch, you've got no other options.
You could even potentially use, I know the American wheat beer yeast is probably the closest sub for a Kolsch yeast. If you couldn't get your hands on the 2565, you can use the 1010, I think it is, the American wheat. And it's going to be a really close substitution. I don't know about using the American wheat beer yeast for an alt beer, but I'd imagine you could probably get away with it as well.
Yeah, because it ferments clean, doesn't it? It's not a.
It ferments really clean, and it also has bit of a sulfur note to it as well.
Okay.
So it could be a good option. When I've used that yeast in the past to make American wheat beers, it really kicks off the sulfur though. So you do have to be mindful of that. Maybe give it a bit of headroom, potentially even like open ferment for like the early stages, and then put a cap on it.
Off gas.
After a couple of days, once it's done blowing off all its farts. But that might be something worth experimenting with as well, because it's always annoying when you're brewing a beer style that you're only really kind of limited to 1 or 2 yeasts, and then if you can't get those yeasts, it's really frustrating and painful. So keep that in mind. In terms of grain bill, traditionally, again, people who've seen me do like German things on here or in person know that I'm a bit of a purist, and I like to stick to 1, maybe 2 malts for most of my German beers. So my Märzen is 100% Munich malt, my Vienna is 100% Vienna malt, my Helles is 100% Pilsner malt, so on and so forth. I don't like to kind of go too crazy with different malts. And with this one, I definitely could have gone 100% Munich malt, or even mostly Munich malt with like a little bit of dark Munich to give it a little bit of extra kind of darkness, a little bit of extra copper. But for some reason, I decided to go absolutely wild with it. I was reading a bunch of things, and I kept hearing people go, oh, you know, some people add a bit of this, and some, oh, that'd be nice. And some people add, oh, yeah, I can see that working. So I've completely gone against my normal rules for German beers, and will I suffer from it? Possibly. So I've gone with 2 kilos, or 45% of the grain bill, with best dark Munich, best malts, dark Munich. So that's about 28 EBC malt, and that's the biggest percentage of anything that I've used, because I really want to get that darkness and that richness from Munich malt, not from sort of other places. I've done 1.5 kilos, or 33.7% of best malts light Munich, which is 15 EBC, so about half as dark as the dark Munich. And then I've put in 750 grams of Pils malt. Now, the reason I did that is I wanted to have a little bit of extra converting power. I didn't want, because this demo was going to be more about the Braumeister than it was about the Altbier style, you could definitely get away without the Pils and malt and just going Munich and dark Munich and nothing else. If you did like a protein rest and like maybe, so like what I've done before with the Helles, like dough in at sort of 35, 36 degrees, bring it up to a protein rest, then do your alpha, your beta, your alpha, and then you mash out. You could probably get away with it. I didn't want to sort of have a crazy multi rest mash, even though that would have showcased the Braumeister's ability to really easily do multi-rest mashes. I thought we'd keep it a little bit more simple for today's brewing. So the Pils malt's going to kind of, it's a bit of a cheat code to get me over the line there. And that brings me to the Carafa Special 1 that I put in there. So because I was using a little bit of Pils in there, that was like lightening the color up a little bit. So I put in just 50 grams of Carafa Special 1, which is 1.1% of the total grain bill. It's just going to add that little bit of extra color, get to that nice rich copper that I'm chasing. But because it's Carafa Special, it doesn't have the husk on it when it's roasted. So you get the color without too much of the roastiness, and keeping it at around 1%. I'll just wait for the trolley. Keeping it around 1%, and by using the dehusked roasted malt, I'm not expecting it to be roasty at all, just to have that slight bit of color, and it might add a little bit of dryness to the beer as well, which isn't going to hurt. And finally, 3.4% of the grain bill, 150 grams. I just put in a little bit of wheat malt. mostly for head retention. Just the protein you get from the wheat helps to give you a nice fluffy head. Again, it's such a small amount. It's not going to massively change the flavour. It might give a slight malt complexity, which I like to put wheat malt in a lot of things, just to change up the malt character a little bit. It's really good in like pale ales, IPAs, things like that. Just to kind of add, I don't know, it just adds a little something different. Like wheat tastes different to barley, and having a little bit of wheat in your grain bill gives you a slightly different malt character that you don't get not having it.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like a bit of a snap, a bit of a it's tartness, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, it's
it's
hard to describe.
Hard to describe. It's wheat bixy.
Yeah. There's also creaminess.
Yeah, creaminess, good head retention. Like it adds a whole lot of positive things to a beer. So I'll put some of that in there as well. If I was going to take any one of those grains out, it'd probably be the wheat because it doesn't really need to be there. But I don't know. I saw a few people were doing it, and I thought, sounds like a good idea. So that's the malt bill, and my justification for it. But you can really play with this. I've seen a few people talk about adding crystal malt. I think there's kind of two main types of alt beer. There's the Dusseldorf one, and there's the not Dusseldorf one.
Right.
I think the not Dusseldorf one tends to be a lot sweeter, a little bit less bitter, a little bit less dry. So in that instance, you might play with adding a little bit of like Munich or something like that. I wouldn't go outside Germany for your caramel malts. I think I've mentioned here before, like the caramels from Germany are a little bit more acidic and a little bit less rich and caramelly and cloying. And I definitely don't think you want any of that in this. So if you were going to play with some crystal malts or some caramels, I would, and this is just advice, this isn't like you have to do anything, like do whatever you like, do what you think makes the beer that you want to drink. Because you're probably right. But yeah, if you're going to play with some crystal malts, I keep it fairly low, under 5% of your grain bill, and I would stick to the German ones, just because it's a different caramel character that you get from it. It's drier, it's more acidic, and I think it's going to be a better option. Yep. So steer clear of the English. No English crystal malts, no Australian crystal malts, which are kind of modelled on English ones. The American ones, probably as well, I'd be inclined to avoid. And if you can't get your hands on the German ones, I mean, if you're in Australia, we pretty much always have German stuff available, so you can order from us, we'll send it to you no matter where you are. If you're outside Australia, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of customs laws which are going to make it tricky for us to send malt to you. But do the best with what you can find. And if you can't find the German ones, I don't know, maybe consider not using crystal malt or caramel malts in your sort of beer. You don't really need it. Like I said, I could have done this just with light and dark Munich. And it probably would have been a really authentic kind of tasty version of the beer. A lot of the German beers historically were brewed single malt. And the malting and the brewing was kind of the same job. So like the brewery would malt its own malt to make the beer that it wanted to make. So if it wanted to make a darker beer, it would make the malt darker, or if it wanted to make a lighter beer, it would make the malt lighter, so on and so forth. So it's really kind of traditional to stick to one or two malts with your German beers. And you could definitely do just Munich for this, and it would be really nice. And I probably will one day, but not today. Today we're doing it different. So that is the malt. In terms of mash, I'm just doing the Hotchkiss mash, which is like a Cheats German mash. Doing a 63 degree, 72 degree, and a 78 degree. So beta, alpha, and mash out. Again, if I was doing this at home with a brow, it would be a 35-degree mash in, and like for no amount of time. Don't hold it there or anything. Just mash in at 35, and then let it ramp up to probably 56, 57 for a 20-minute, 20-minute protein rest.
Yep. Up
to 63, up to 72, and then up to 78. So 5-step.
Yep. I think you did that mash in your Hellas video.
In the Hellas, yeah.
So yeah, if anyone interested, yeah, definitely check that video out.
That's my standard German mash. This is traditionally a decocted beer.
Ah. Okay.
So if you are that way inclined, which I definitely am, the Braumeister makes it really easy to do step mashes, but if you're a bit of a nerd and you like the kind of history and connecting yourself to the different techniques of the past and present, you could definitely do a decoction with this and it would really add to the flavour. So if you did like 100% probably light Munich maybe a little bit of dark Munich in there, and just did like a triple decoction, you would get an awesome flavour. And
an uber traditional German beer too, to
use
a German
traditional
word, uber.
Yeah, uber
traditional
traditional
today. Cool, yeah.
Should I talk about what a decoction is?
Shall we? Why not? I guess for anyone out there who doesn't
very basic
familiar.
Yeah, very sort of. So if any of you guys watched my lambic video, I should say our lambic video, because without Joel, I'd just be standing here talking to nothing and nobody, and none of you would see it. It's very sort of similar to that, where you basically you mash in fairly thick, nowhere near as thick as a turbid mash, but and then you pull out a third of the thicker stuff, so like the actual grain itself, leave more of the liquid behind. So you'd start again, like I was saying, 35, 36 degrees, pull out a third of your mash, bring that to the boil, and boil that for a little while. Then once you're, so say like 10 minutes for your first acid rest, they call it, and then add that third back into your mash, stir it through, and that'll bring it to your next temperature. Once you're at your next temperature, pull out your third again, bring it to your boil, and so the liquid that's the 2/3 that you're leaving behind, that's your mash. And that's going to sit at that temperature that you raised it to and do its converting. So bring it up to your 50 whatever degrees you're doing for your decoction for however long, say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, while you're boiling that 1/3. Put your 1/3 back in, that brings it up to your next temperature, so on. You get the picture. You repeat that. And that boiling does a couple of things. It sort of kicks off a whole heap of Maillard reactions, which is probably the biggest reason why you would do it, and really gives an intense, rich maltiness to whatever beer you're making. It also, and I'm not sure exactly why this happens, because I don't know, I'm just a dumb guitarist, I don't understand science. But apparently decoction mashing really ramps up the fermentability of your wort as well. And you get really good efficiency from it in terms of like your extract and your conversion. So I don't know exactly why that is. Possibly just from having those extra steps. I know that like by adding those extra steps into the program on the Braumeister, you tend to get better extraction, better efficiency. So it could just be those extra temperature rests are just breaking down those malts even further. Even with modern malts, they're just breaking everything down even further, making things more accessible for the enzymes to kind of get to work. So it could just be as simple as that. But it's a really good thing to do if you approach it with the right mindset, and if you do your homework before you get started, so you know exactly what you're doing, how much you're pulling out, and all the rest of it. Like we did with the lambic, I wasn't sure how it was going to go. I was expecting disaster, but because we did the homework and we nutted out the numbers, everything went exactly as it was supposed to, and it was a really smooth, fun way to brew, which I'll definitely do again. Same with decoction. My first decoction, I didn't do the homework. My first decoction didn't bring the temperature up to where I needed it to be, so I had to add boiling water, and then it was getting really thin, and I was panicking and flapping around, and it was just all just a big kerfuffle. Whereas I think when you do that homework, it makes it a really fun day.
You want to get your ducks in a row, and there's a few extra pots and pans you need, and some extra gear when you're doing it.
Just be prepared. Just know what you're doing, know where everything's going beforehand, map it out in your head, do the numbers, and I think the main thing with any of those sorts of things is go into it with the mindset of I'm doing this because I think it's going to be really fun to brew in this traditional style, not I'm doing this because I need to brew in this way to get the beer to taste the way it's like, no. I mean, sort of, yeah. Like you'll get a very different beer from doing a decoction than what you will from not. But you can make a delicious anything on any system just by approaching it in the right way and doing things that you need to do. There's things like melanoid and malt. If you want to get a cheap decoction, put a small percentage of melanoid and malt in your grist. And that's going to mimic the kind of character you would get from doing all that boiling and stuff. You do the boiling because it's fun and you like brewing and you like to attach yourself to the kind of brewing traditions. All right, so where are we at in our mash? We are 33 of 35 minutes through our first step, so we're getting ready to jump up to the next step. Has there been any questions in chat so far?
No, not for a while. Okay. So yeah, I hope everyone's still with us.
We've kind of covered like most of the features of the brow, I think. So we're just kind of we'll get through the alt beer specific stuff, and we'll probably just about wrap up early, maybe.
We possibly could. Yeah, actually, I did have a question. Going back to yeast, I'm not sure if you mentioned, because you were talking about perhaps the fermentation, or unless you were going to get to fermentation.
I can, yeah, maybe we'll do that. Maybe I'll go through the hops, and then we'll hit into fermentation. We'll talk about fermentation strategies and techniques. I'm deliberately avoiding history.
Yeah, fair enough.
Partly because I didn't research much history, knowing this was going to be more a Braumeister focused smaller stream. And I knew that I could just stand here and talk for 2 hours about the history of alt beer if I let myself get away with it.
I'm sure you could.
If I did the research, which I didn't, so I'm going to avoid it. So I don't look foolish. So hops wise, the absolute optimal perfect choice for this beer is Spalt. Which is funny because usually when we're talking German beers and we talk about hop choices, it's like any German hop is fine, except maybe Spalt. Because Spalt has a kind of a very different character. It's like it's got a real twang, a real kind of unique character to it.
Yeah, right.
But it is the traditional hop for alt beer. And if you really want to get that alt beer kind of flavour and character, that's the hop you use.
Spalt all the way.
We haven't had Spalt here for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Just can't get it. And for some reason in my head I thought we did. And I was really excited. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make it. I'm going to put the Spalt in there and I'm finally going to get to use Spalt. And no. So, barring that, it goes back to your generic advice on any German beer, which is any German hop will get you to where you need to be. You could even use Saaz, which would be fine. I think Spalt has a bit of a kind of floral spiciness to it as well, so that would work really well. Even Perla, Northern Brewer, your Hallertaus, anything like that would be fine. Today I've gone with Northern Brewer for two reasons. One being we didn't have any other German hops packaged. That's probably the main reason, being honest. which isn't to sell Northern Brewer short. That's one of my favourite hops. It's got a real nice kind of minty character to it, which is really nice, and I think it's going to go well in this beer too. But also, like, it's, you know, talking alt beer. It's like a northern beer. This is the northern parts of Germany. It's, you know, it's the Rhineland, so northwest. And then the other main variety, so there's two main varieties of alt beer. There's the Dusseldorf Altbier and there's the Northern Altbier. So I thought, you know, makes sense. Northern brewer, northern beer, why not? And I've used 40 grams, which I'll put in all at 60 minutes, because as we've discussed before, you do get the flavour and the character of whatever hops you use as your 60-minute addition coming through in your end beer. So there will be some of that Northern Brewer character that will come through in the beer. You absolutely can do a late addition in an alt beer, and a lot of German brewers do. Reading through the BJCP descriptions, it does say that you don't want a strong or pronounced hop character in the beer, like low to none hop character. So realistically, and again, like I've said before, you probably will get low to no hop character from a 60-minute addition. You don't really need to add any at the end, but you absolutely can, and it could be a cool thing. And again, make the beer you want to drink. Yep. If you think that you would like to have a little bit of extra hop character, who cares what the style guidelines say? Make the beer you want to drink. Commercial breweries aren't looking at the BJCP guidelines and going, oh no, we can't put a late addition of hops into this beer, because then like some judge is going to taste it and say, this is not a true...
You're not allowed to sell this now.
So, yeah, we can't sell it because, you know, it's silly. And it would be absolutely be the same thing, even in Germany. Like, each brewery will make the beer that they like the taste of and they think that is going to sell. So it's, you know, these beers evolved as styles through that process. So
sure, yeah.
There's no wrong way of doing any of this stuff. If you want to put some extra hops in at the end because you like the taste of hops, do it. If you want it to be an alt beer, maybe stick to German hops for that later addition, so your spicy floral kind of things. I don't think you would want a big citrus kick in your alt beer, but again, maybe you do. Maybe that's exactly what you want. Chuck in 50 grams of Galaxy in a flame out or whatever, because you think it'll be really delicious, and probably will. Let's be honest, Galaxy is an amazing hop. Most things you throw it in, it tastes really good. You just might have ventured a little bit out of the alt beer territory when you do that, but at the end of the day, you're the one with 20 litres of the stuff you got to drink, so make the beer you want to make. So yeah, that's my logic behind hops. It's a 0.7 to 1 bitterness to gravity ratio. It's kind of what you're chasing. I think this will be like 0.67 or something like that, so pretty close. Maybe a little bit lower, but because I'll be hot cubing it, there will be a little bit of extra bitterness that I'll get out of it, so that'll probably make up to around 0.7, which is what we want. And that kind of brings us around to Joel's question. Yeast and fermentation. So if you do use the 1007, which I strongly recommend, I think White Labs might have a German ale or like an alt beer sort of ale, maybe North German ale or something like that, yeast in their range as well. If you can get it, use it. It's the proper yeast. It's going to do the thing you want it to do in the way that you want to do it, and you're going to get the character that you're chasing. If not, do the best you can. Kolsch. Like I said, maybe the American wheat might work. Maybe even like the S189, the Swiss lager yeast might be an okay option in the dry stuff.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I'm assuming you need a yeast that can also, again, ideally, if you've got the capacity to do so, ferment at a cooler temperature, an ale yeast that won't stall when it's, brought down. Yeah, and you want to ferment this one nice and cool. Yeah.
So the 1007 is very boisterous at 14, 15 degrees.
Right. Oh, you want to set lager temperatures.
So if you pitch nice and cool, maybe 12, 13 degrees, get it to 14, 15, hold it there for your fermentation. You'll get a really vigorous ferment, especially if you put a little bit of wheat in there. You'll probably end up with a fair bit of froth, so keep that in mind. Maybe have some towels ready to mop up a mess in your fermenting fridge if it happens. And yeah, should get out of the way nice and quick. Chew through the sugar and get you sort of where you need to be. I would recommend lagering this. Maybe for 2 weeks to a month. Yep. I think it's about roughly a 7 to 9 month kind of drinking period that I was reading. Like you kind of like, it's good up to about 9 months.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Which most lagers are kind of around that.
Yeah.
Most of your sort of German beers.
Shelf life.
You want to drink them fresh, but not too fresh because you want to lager them as well.
Got it.
So maybe a little longer life than like a Pilsner, which you want to drink reasonably fresh because you've got all that bright hoppiness. But I would try to give it at least a few weeks cold in the keg after you finish fermenting. And I would do my kind of thing that I do with lagers, which is drop it down slowly, a degree at a time, to get down to that lagering temperature.
Right.
I don't think it's going to keep chugging away the way that lager yeast does at your kind of 1 degree, 0 degrees kind of thing. I don't know.
Okay.
But I do know it's a lot more tolerant of colder temperatures than regular ale yeast, so maybe it will. I think that's something worth giving it a chance to do if you can, because that will help to give you that dry finish and that kind of nice unctuous, is it the word? Moorish. That nice Moorish kind of finish where you just keep wanting more and more and more of it.
Yeah,
And that's pretty much going to get you to where you need to be. I've gone, in terms of water, I've gone with just 5 grams of calcium sulfate today. We do have chloride heavy water in like from the Altona water that we get here. So I didn't really feel that I needed to add any more chloride to it. The sulfate's going to help with the dry perception. And also, because I heard slight sulfur character is good, having sulfite heavy water can give that perception a little bit as well. And that's pretty much it. That's how I've sort of approached this recipe. I haven't brewed it before, so it's kind of all very theoretical. Based on style guidelines, based on a bunch of recipes I've read. We do have an alt beer book in the classic styles range that we sell. Those books are amazing. If you want to like collect books to fill your beer library, those are really good ones to get. And that goes into like that thickness detail just on the style of alt beer. So you can really learn a heap about it. Not just the history, but how to brew it, different strategies, like different kinds of malt bills that'll work, fermentation profiles, yeast choices, hops, all that sort of stuff. Really in-depth sort of stuff. So yeah, that's alt beer, I guess. Was there anything else you think that we needed to go over with anything? I can't sort of think of anything else to touch on with the brow because it's sort of...
Well, funnily, that's a word. Let's go with it. Funny you should ask that. There is a question.
Awesome.
Actually, Adam is asking, he's curious about how effective the cooling jacket is versus, say, an immersion chiller.
Surprisingly effective.
Yep, I can vouch for that. Yep.
Yeah. When the last ones came in, I don't know if it's the exact same as what the old pluses were, or if it's like a slight upgrade. But basically, we tested it. So we bought some water to the boil, chucked in an immersion chiller, and timed how long it took to get down to a certain temperature. And then we brought it back to the boil, ran the cooling jacket and timed how long it took, and it was pretty much bang on.
Yep.
Really close, which surprised us. Like we didn't think it was going to be nearly as efficient. So yeah, definitely, I would say on par with your immersion chillers, or very close to.
Yep. I can back that with my own anecdotal experience. I've got one of the older model Braumeisters at home. I'll pop up on the screen here, do it properly. which doesn't have a jacket, and I used immersion chiller on that for years, and then I borrowed the one that we had here, and yeah, I could say that let's wait for the sound to go. The cooling jacket is about as effective as a immersion chiller, just from my experience.
And we do recommend as well using, as we do with the immersion chillers as well, a two-stage cooling process. I was
just going to say, yeah. So what does that look like?
What does that look like? So basically, start off just with your tap water.
Yep.
Run that through your jacket until it gets down to probably around 35 degrees, which you'll really see it start to slow down the cooling at that point. And then switch over to ice cold water. So pumped through the jacket, which is pretty easy to set up. Like one of those little silver pumps that we sell costs not much. I can't think off the top of my head. Under 100.
Bucks, something like that, 60 bucks.
Yeah. And just sort of run iced water through that to get down the rest of the way. And that last little 35 to 20 degree stretch can take 30 minutes, realistically. So by switching to the ice cold water, you basically, what's happening with any of that sort of stuff, and warning before I start this, I pretty much completely failed thermodynamics in year 11 physics. I aced the other two, like radiation and light, and completely flunked thermodynamics, and that brought my overall mark down to a C.
Oh, well.
But you've got two different things, two different sort of mediums, each with a different thermal index, and each with a different temperature. And based on the thickness and the contact and the temperatures, they're going to hit a point where they reach thermal equilibrium, which is where they hit a temperature somewhere in the middle. The closer those temperatures get to each other, the less energy transfer you're going to get between them, and the longer it's going to take to get to that end point. So at the start, you've got quite cold water and you've got quite hot wort. So the energy is going to very happily flow into the cold water. Like the heat energy is going to very happily flow into the cold water because there's like lots of room for it to kind of get sucked out into that cold water. But once you hit sort of 35 degrees and your groundwater's 20 degrees, there's a lot less difference between those. So less of that heat energy from the wort is going to be pulled into that colder water. So by dropping it another, say 15, 20 degrees, the water that you're cycling through, that then gives a lot more scope for that heat energy to flow in. But if you start with ice cold water, that ice cold water is going to be not ice cold in a very short period of time.
You're going to waste it.
So that's a very basic and probably slightly wrong explanation.
That made sense to me.
Of the principles at play there, but.
So yeah, have a, my method is to have an esky sitting by and chuck ice in it. Either, you buy ice from the servo, or have some of those freezer packs in the fridge that, you have for the kids' lunches or whatever, and chuck those in the esky just to cool the water down, and then, attach a pump to it, recirculate it. Circulate it? Going well with the words today. But pump it through. Once the wort gets to about 30 degrees, thereabouts. It can take up to an hour.
Reticulated splines.
All up the cooling process, I find. But the really great thing by having a jacketed is you don't really need to have the wort exposed to air when you're doing the chilling process. So you don't have this immersion chiller sitting in your kettle. You just put the lid on, and then once you've done your initial whirlpool, you can just let the jacket do the rest of the work.
Your temperature display on your unit will tell you exactly how quick or slow
things are going.
The numbers are dropping, and when you see those numbers really start to slow down, then you're like, sweet, switch it over to the ice water and finish the job.
So it's all really just sort of plug and play, and hassle-free.
Yeah, and the jacket itself has 2 stainless steel Gardena fittings on the back, so any garden hose will clip straight onto it. In terms of the pump, garden hoses are standard as 12 mil internal diameter.
Yep.
So you would generally have a 12 mil barb that you'd screw onto the pump anyway.
Yep.
You'll be able to clamp any garden hose straight onto that really easily and use that to clip onto your chiller. You don't have to worry about it being hygienic or anything like that because it's not actually in contact with your beer.
Another bonus. Cool. Well, I hope that answered your question, Adam. So how about lastly, for a bit of fun, a Tier Master question. It's off topic, but he's asked for our 3 all-time favourite dry yeasts. I'm gonna guess it's Ben might say Nottingham, and Nottingham.
You're getting ahead of the. Because I was going to say, well, I'll let Joel go first, and then I'll answer afterwards.
You'll answer. I stole your thunder. Sorry. Well, that's probably what would be my. Nottingham would be up.
Nottingham would definitely, be one of mine.
And I'm not really a big dry yeast user, so I mean, I think Nottingham again. I would just have to say that probably fulfills
Nottingham.
of all three. It depends obviously what you're brewing.
Nottingham is really awesome though, and it's one of those yeasts where if you're not sure what to use, that's generally a good choice. Because it ferments clean, but it doesn't strip the malt out. So it doesn't get in the way of the hops, and it doesn't strip the malt out. So I use it for all my hoppy beers now.
Yeah, you can use it
on the advice of Jeff, which most of you guys will be familiar with Jeff. He's been using it as his one true yeast for a very long time. And he won me over because I had his hoppy beers. I'm like, oh, I really like that character. And so now all my hoppy beers, I use it as well. And you can also use it for things like stouts and porters and things like that you don't want necessarily to have a really massive English ester character, but you want it to ferment in more of an English way. If you want your stout to be a little bit drier, using Nottingham is a really good option because the yeast is a workhorse that will chew up what is available to it, and it'll give you a really nice, clean, dry fermentation. There's not too many things you can't use it for. And then I also use it for things like ginger beers, and I've used it in ciders. So you can, it's a really versatile yeast.
Very versatile. Yeah, that's it.
My second dry yeast is the Lelven EC118, which everyone calls the champagne yeast.
Oh, okay.
And that is my thing that isn't beer yeast. So if I'm making something that isn't beer, doesn't matter what it is, probably going to use that yeast for it. I use it for all my wine. So I make wine now probably every 2 years because I'm making enough of it that it'll last me a long time. And red, white, doesn't matter. I'll use the Lelven EC118 because it's reliable. I know exactly what it's going to do. It's going to ferment clean. If I run it a little warmer, it'll give me some interesting kind of ester characters and things like that. I use it for making things which I intend to make a little bit stronger down the line, without going into too much detail. So like when I go on my New Zealand holidays and it's legal to distill over in New Zealand, I always take a few packs of Lelven EC118 in my pockets because that's what I'll use to ferment the wash that I'll eventually turn into spirits.
Hypothetically.
Well, no, it's in New Zealand.
In New Zealand,
legit,
sure.
It's legit.
Yeah.
Only when I go to New Zealand.
Allowed,
Also for any fruit wines, again, cider, it's a really good option. Anything that you want it to ferment right out as well. So wine is obviously an example of that. But things that you don't want to kind of have any residual stuff in there. It's got a high alcohol tolerance. It's a real workhorse. It's got a kill factor. So if you're using fruit, which can be a little bit sketchy in terms of wild yeast and bacteria, still obviously use your some kind of SO2 sulfur dioxide, whether that's with Campden tablets or potassium metabisulfite or sodium metabisulfite, whatever, however you're adding your SO2, still do that to knock out kind of the bulk of the kind of unwanteds. But then throwing the EC118 in there, it has a kill factor, so it will actually actively knock out any rival yeasts and bacteria and things in there and kind of take over and take charge. But it's still friendly to malo.
Ah, okay. So it won't kill the malolactic bacteria if you're using that, but will outcompete or actively
That's
kill.
my understanding, but now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I'll have to check on that. Because I have, like, there's been a couple of times where I've used malo culture where some things have kind of gone a bit awry. And I'm wondering whether that is because of the kill factor of the EC118. I'll look into that. I'll check on that. But yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah.
And third, dry yeast. They're kind of the two that I use.
Can you go through?
And I use those two for probably 70-80% of what I ferment.
Yep. I was going to maybe... I could suggest the third. I quite like the Belle Saison. Again, it's a very specific yeast. Not one that you'd use for an American IPA or something, but for a Saison yeast, it's pretty good.
I guess another one might be the Kvike. We've got the dried Kvike yeast now as well. I think it's Voss. The Danstar one that we stock, which is the slightly more spicy one of the Kvikes.
Yeah.
We've got a few interesting ones now too, which I haven't used yet, but I've been meaning to. Like, we've got the Verdant IPA and we've got the New England IPA.
Yeah, I've not used those. I'm
yeasts,
really curious.
Which I think are both for those kind of hazy hop bombs.
Yep.
Which I'm overdue to brew one of those actually. So maybe I'll have a play with them, but. There's a really ever-growing, ever-interesting range of dry yeasts now as options. I think with liquid yeast, one of the big selling points of it has always been that you've just got options. You've got massive variety. You can choose the specific yeast for the type of thing that you want to do. And with starters, you can have it super healthy as well. Dry yeast suffered a little bit early on from a reputation of not being as good. And I think it was a deserved reputation early on, but it's come a long way since then, and you can get really good results from it. It's just a matter of if those results are the specific results that you want. For me, I have, partly due to that early prejudice of like reading books saying don't use dry yeast, so I didn't use dry yeast. And I've developed like my favourite strains all from amongst the pantheon of white yeast strains. But I definitely was a convert with the noddy. So I think it pays to play, to try things and see what you like.
Don't listen to what the voices out there say. Just try stuff yourself and
I think the third, I can't bring myself to use dry lager yeast. Is the only thing.
Yeah.
I've used the S189, which I mentioned earlier, the Swiss lager yeast, as a cheats lager because I heard you could ferment at 15, 16 and it would give you like a pretty serviceable lager. I found it kind of does, but you need to lager it for a long time, nice and cold, because it has like a really kind of gross flavour which goes away with aging. I don't know if gross flavour is the right term.
I'll take it.
It's definitely not a BJCP approved descriptor.
Gross.
There's a gross flavour in this beer that I don't like, that I refuse to describe.
I really like the background note of gross in this. I'm just going to do a camera thing.
Fly buzzing around, annoying. But yeah, once you do lager it out, it comes up really good though. So that's a good option too. It's how would I describe it? It's a slightly creamier yeast. So I don't know if anyone in chat has sort of been brewing for a while and remembers the old Danish lager yeast, the 2042. It's a similar character to that kind of slightly creamier flavour. Which sounds weird, like, because you think creamy would be mouthfeel, but it's like a slightly creamier flavour, which it adds, which is really nice. Funnily enough, in a cream ale, I've used it to good success. But yeah, I don't know, just with lagers, like I tend to just, the Yeast 2124, the Yeast 2206 and the Yeast 2278, like I feel like they're the only 3 lager yeasts I'm ever going to need.
Yes,
and I'll
sure.
play with other ones, like whatchamacallit, we've got the 2001s just come into stock, which is the Urquell, the Pilsner Urquell.
Yeah.
So I'm really tempted to knock out a Pils with that, because I love Czech Pils and I love Urquell. So why not? I just whacked my microphone, so I apologise for the big sound that you all would have heard. And there's, you know, like different interesting kind of quirky things come out, like the Rocky Mountain Lager was out a little while ago. There's, like, they do bring out kind of interesting PC yeasts, which are worth, I think, having a play with. But
yeah, I always keep an eye on the PC.
the Hallersbach is another one they bring out a fair bit, which I've been meaning to use. I keep forgetting to. I'm just never in the right sort of spot.
Yeah, in your brewing
beer
cycle.
and keg wise to like kind of fit in a Maybach, which is actually my favourite style of beer, which is why I keep meaning to use that specific yeast. But the 2206 does such a good job on it as well, though. It's just like
one yeast that I don't think they release it often, but it pops up every now and then, and I always miss it, is the Belgian stout. It sounds really interesting and something I'd love to drink.
Well, did you get on a little while ago? Tilquin released their Rollquin stout.
No.
It was like a sour stout hybrid thing that was really nice.
Oh right, did we get that? I missed that completely. Damn. Yeah. So that's another yeast that I
actually really like roasty sours.
Yeah. Yeah, I've not had too many in a time, but. If you like sour beers, yeah, for sure.
I think it's, and that's the thing, I don't particularly. Like, I'm not a huge sour beer kind of person, but there's something about the roastiness with the sourness.
Yeah.
I'm not a big roasty beer person, generally speaking. Like, I do like, I'm one of those things where I always say, oh, I'm not really big on stouts and porters, and then every one I have, I'm like, oh, that's really nice. Maybe I am big on them.
Maybe you are.
But I like sour roasty beers more than I like roasty beers or sour beers.
Yeah, right. It's interesting.
There's something about that combination that just really works for me.
It's an art too, because it can go really wrong, roast and sour.
Oh yeah.
It's not two flavours that you would think go together.
Well, often people talk about deliberately upping the pH on their roasty beers to get more of the chocolatiness to come out. So to
a point,
having a sour roasty beer kind of goes the other way from that, which thinking about it, I don't really think that there was a particularly strong chocolate flavour in that Rollquin beer either. Like
and you've got to watch it doesn't get too dry, I would imagine, which is, again, odd for sour beer, because sour beers are notoriously bone dry.
You could probably play with fruiting and stuff as well, like and again, I'm just riffing now, but like something like a roasty, stouty, portery type thing, soured and then aged on sour cherries or something would be really nice. Maybe even with some coconut, like a cherry ripe, sour cherry ripe kind of thing. Would be kind of cool. I don't know, lots of options.
Yeah, well,
I don't even know how we got onto that.
I think we just we started talking about dry yeast and wound up down a rabbit hole. But maybe that's a good question for the comments. Maybe not for the chat, because I think we'll be wrapping up soon, but for anyone watching this later down in history.
Chuck your favourite dry yeast and say why they're your favourites as well, because that's one thing when people just go, I really like this yeast, and then if you haven't used it before, it can be hard. I know personally, when I'm making a beer and I know that it's going to come out exactly the way I want it to with one of the yeasts that I'm familiar with, I take a bit of convincing to step out of the comfort zone and use a different yeast. But if you can describe what it is about the yeast that you like how it behaves, the kind of flavours and characters you get from it, then, I mean, I definitely read the comments.
Yeah, totally.
And that's useful for me too, because then I can kind of justify and push myself to try some different things.
Something different. So yeah, what dry yeast do you like? And look, if you want to go down a tangent and talk about what your favourite PC your seasonal releases for
That's how we got on
liquid
it.
beer,
The PC
yeast.
strain, Belgian Stout.
What are your favourite seasonals? Yeah,
I think Matty made one with the Belgian Stout. That came
right,
out
did he?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
That'd be a
Yeah,
good
I
one
missed
for our Imperial Stout work kit. You could
Yeah.
you could use the Belgian Stout for that. I reckon that'd be a really nice beer that'll come out of that too.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Ben. I think we've probably covered alt beer, and we're still counting down the mash from the Braumeister.
I hope we covered enough of the Braumeister. It was sort of like I wasn't expecting. I didn't know what to expect. I was sort of like.
We sort of whipped through it pretty quickly today.
We raced through the features really quickly.
I will say, keep an eye out for the unboxing video. Liking and subscribing is a good way to keep up to date with those sorts of things. So by all means,
the unboxing video, we're going to go into a lot of detail on all the features, right through all the functions on the controller.
Yeah. Ben goes through.
There's even a volume
everything.
feature.
Yeah, I know, right?
And I used. There's a timer now as well in the manual setting. So if anybody who's familiar with Braumeisters, like in the manual setting, you just set a temperature. You can set a timer now as well, so it'll beep at you. So if you're doing, one thing that we do here a lot is double mashing with our work kits and stuff, and you can be running your whole thing in manual mode. And still have your timers going off and everything, so you know when to kick off the actual brewing program, and it's just really good. Which
I could see myself using, because I would wind up using manual mode on mine as it is, and just
and in the display as well, like when you're setting your temperature, it's got a slider now. That's so much better than like having to push to get to the number you want. You just slide it to where you need it to be, and it's there.
Really is almost like a smartphone the way they've done it.
The old touchscreen controllers were good, but they were a little bit clumsy. Whereas this is really, it's a phone.
Totally.
You can pick from different options on the screen and scroll down and move it around and do all those things. It's just really awesome.
The level of customization is pretty amazing. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming up as soon as possible, the next week or so.
Well, that actually, you touched on my one criticism.
Okay.
Level of customization. Can't pick the background light up color. That was really cool on the old controllers. You can set it to red or blue or green or yellow. But it's a pretty minor.
Maybe a firmware update will resolve.
Well, I don't think they've got the lights around the edges anymore.
Oh, okay. It was around the. Oh, yeah, right. I understand. Yeah, the color around the.
But you can always add your own neons. Like with a car, like strap your LED lights.
You could do some
trick it out that way. As criticisms go, it's a pretty minor one.
I think it's a pretty minor one. So, of course, if anyone has any comments or questions about the Braumeister or about alt beer, once again, chuck them in the comments below. We always do our best to answer the questions that come through there.
I have been falling behind a bit on my articles. I'm probably 3/4 done on the Baltic Porter one. And I'll try to knock out an article on alt beer as well. So we didn't go into a huge amount of detail in here, but with the articles I try to cover a little bit more. And because I've got Google in front of me, I tend to get the dates and stuff right as well. So if you subscribe to our newsletter or kind of keep an eye on us that way, then you'll get those articles sort of come out in newsletters. You'll be able to read up and see a little bit more detail.
Yeah, and I do try to link across to those articles as well, and other bits on the website from the YouTube channel. So I think that might be a stream.
Yeah. Nice quick one today.
Yeah. So thanks for watching. By all means, do the like and subscribe thing. Check out our website. There's a link below that will go to our streaming schedule if anyone is interested in knowing when our upcoming streams will be. We're rolling back to maybe about one a month at the moment, and we're going to be trying to uploading more content, just in general, just shorter videos and things that you might find interesting. So subscribing is a good way to keep abreast of all of that. And I think until next time, thank you, Ben.
No worries.
And we'll see you all on a stream sometime soon. See ya.